You may have realized that being healthy feels different than it did in the past now that you're over 50. If you want to maximize your health potential but don't have time to read through overwhelming pages of Google links, this is the show for you. Welcome to Healthy Tips After 50. We love doing the research, finding solutions, talking to health experts, and learning what works and what doesn't. Now, your host. She spent the last 25 years dedicated to feeling her best and is here to share her best findings with you, Susan Rosen.
Hello, everyone. This is your host, Susan Rosen, and my guest today is Dr. David, I'm going to get this wrong, Wiss?
You got it. Thank you. I got nervous for a minute. So many people get my last name wrong. It's Wiss. Thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure. Good. Phew. I know my name is the same thing. I'll tell you about that after we finish. So welcome, David. And as I always say, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and introduce yourself so I'm not boring people with reading it off a piece of paper.
Reporting from West Los Angeles.
Yay!
And so exciting to learn that we are from the same neck of the woods.
Literally.
Literally, we went to the same middle school and high school. That's Palms Middle School, Hamilton High School. That's West Los Angeles. So I'm a product of the public school system and Los Angeles culture in the 80s and 90s.
Oh,
and
my God.
I was, very fortunate to do my undergrad at USC. Sort of a party animal at the time. Didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life, but I definitely wasn't in a rush to build a career. That's for sure.
Or choose one, right?
Choose one. Yeah, I was postponing that as much as possible. And I did find myself having some health challenges, mental health challenges and physical health challenges. And I got into wellness when I was 24. After being in college for many years and not finishing, switching majors, struggling, trying to figure out how I was going to approach this journey called life. And nutrition and exercise really changed me. So I had one of those stories where kind of wellness, I was desperate. I found wellness. It did the thing that most people wish it did, which is rapidly transform my life within a few months.
Wow.
And so I had a career trajectory change, and I was a personal trainer for a little while I went back to school to learn more about, nutrition. I had to do a lot of biochemistry and core science classes to get a master's in nutrition and become a registered dietitian. Wow. And I've always been off the beaten path. So just interested in topics related to mental health, nutrition for addictions, disordered eating. I kind of like the marginalized groups. I like the forgotten groups, the people that most educational campaigns miss. So I got interested in nutrition for mental health, and then I built a practice called Nutrition in Recovery, which focuses on people that have challenges to where you wouldn't just go into any old nutritionist. You need to talk to someone who knows what it's like to eat in the middle of the night. You want to talk to someone who knows what it's like to have weight cycled for 30 years. You want to talk to someone who knows what it's like to have body image issues, right? All of those particular issues really became my specialty. So I've had the privilege of working with people for 11 plus years with a wide range of challenges. I've since moved into the functional medicine space. I got my PhD in public health with a minor in health psychology. So I've really tried to bring together a lot of different fields, social sciences, psychological sciences, nutritional sciences. And, I'm really blessed because I get to do counseling with people, and I also get to do research. I write papers and collect data. And so I have a pretty amazing career set up here in LA. And I have two children. I have a 2-year-old and a 3-week-old. So I've just come out of a newborn
That's
baby.
scary.
Yeah. Life is good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, thank you for coming on for sure. I do have to say that you are the first person that I have ever met, in not having nothing to do with this even thing, yeah, that we have the exact same educational background.
Yes.
It's bizarre. Okay. So welcome. And let's talk. Boy, I don't know. There's so many interesting avenues that we could go down. I think I may kind of leave it to you to take us in a direction of where you're seeing the most issues, as well as where you're seeing, if you are at all, where things are getting better in certain areas, and particularly as it applies to people 50 and older, which are getting close.
Absolutely. It's funny. I actually started collecting data in my private practice during the pandemic. Everything switched online, obviously. We got accelerated into change in a way that was difficult, but in many ways helpful. Like, I used to have forms that I would email people, right? And they have them fill it out and send it back to me. And it was like, okay, like, we can stop doing this now.
Yeah.
And in setting up, online onboarding, I did, I was still finishing my doctorate at the time. I did submit a IRB, which is an institutional review board, to use the data that I was collecting in my private practice for research. And I've since, it's all fresh in my mind because I wrapped it up this year, and I had over 300 participants.
Wow.
And I just submitted a bunch of different manuscripts with the data, about childhood adversity and how trauma affects eating, disordered eating, addiction-like eating, right? But the point is, I got a chance to look at my my sample and see, who do I treat? I already knew, but
to a degree,
to a degree, but more than half of the 300 were, white women in their 50 and above.
Oh,
right?
Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
And while that's not like a shocker to me, it seems to be the person that seeks help the most, right? They have an interest in help seeking more so than perhaps the 25-year-old male, right? But in terms of getting research published, journals like to see diverse samples, you know what I mean? And so it's a bummer that I don't have as diverse of a sample as I'd like, but more than half of the people in my sample have a history of substance use disorder, which is unique given that I have a particular practice focused on people in recovery. So I have a pretty high percentage of people that have some sort of an addiction history. And somewhere in the 60% people screen positive for some disordered eating. So you could see that I have a particular niche for the person that's got a legacy of trauma, addictions, and disordered eating. And when that's the case, usually people have struggled with food, weight, body image as sort of an ongoing issue, right? And that there's going to be periods in their lives when the noise gets less, right? When job satisfaction was high, maybe before the kids were there, right? There was a period when you were doing yoga 3 times a week, right? And there's these sort of periods of wellness. And then, of course, life shows up. There's adversity, right? I've had my fair share in the last 5 or so years. And, health is more challenging. Eating behaviors are more erratic, unpredictable, et cetera. So in functional medicine, one of the things that we try to do is create what we call a timeline, where you can really look at, obviously, there's a medical timeline, which is of value. Like, when did certain things change? Were there medication, there injuries, were there possible infections or viruses, right? You try to really piece together the health journey. but doing it from a standpoint of behavioral health and mental health is also really valuable. And, I think your listeners could probably do this as an activity of like, just map out a little timeline of like, when were periods, maybe when you got messages that you ended up really internalizing and remembering? When did you have periods when you lost or gained a significant amount of weight, right? When were there periods where you engaged in extremes, right? Dietary extremes, thinking extremes, etc. And you can
exercising,
over exercising, right? You look at like your timeline. In these 2 years, I exercised twice a day, and then 4 years later, I couldn't get it together to get to the gym at all, right? Like, start seeing these patterns of connectedness, and then also putting them into the context of our lives, right? Like, what was going on? Where were you living? Who were you living with? And it starts to really elucidate a powerful story, and as a practitioner, as a provider, my job is to help someone understand their story and sort of tell it back to them in a way that feels meaningful, And just to give you an example, it wouldn't be uncommon for me to learn that one of my clients or patients was on a stimulant medication for ADHD in their late teens. And now they're in their 30s and they're binge eating a little bit, right? And they don't understand why, right? And I'm not saying that one caused the other, because there's so many factors in behavioral health. But yeah, if someone is weight suppressed for a few years and not listening to their appetite because there's some external medication, right? It would make sense that would return later, that there would be a side effect or a consequence. And oftentimes when it comes to eating and health, nutrition, I should say, people don't look at it as a life course or a lifespan issue. People tend to really look at it as this 24-hour day, just
what happened in the last week.
Yeah, that's it. Like, count your calories, and it's calories in, calories out. And like, you look at your day, but nutrition affects us over our lifespan. Someone, for example, that had a drug and alcohol problem in their 20s and became addicted to illicit substances, that's going to leave an imprint on the brain that has implications for eating behavior, right? Traumas in those first 18 years of life prime the nervous system for binge eating or even for purging, right? And there's such an awesome story in each of us. And doing a timeline to sort of conceptualize it is a worthwhile endeavor. Medication changes, life changes, all of that, and you can start to see, okay, this is where I've been, this is where I'm at, and you can start to get a more realistic picture of where you might be headed, right? Yeah. It's always interesting when someone tells me that they're 62 years old and their goal is to weigh less than they did when they were 25. And it's just like, good luck. You know what I mean?
It's like,
and
why?
They don't realize it. They don't realize they're saying they just have like, oh, I really want to be 140, but like maybe when they were, the lowest they've ever been was 145 back, 30 years ago. It's like, it's not realistic that your body would be able to, reach this lowest weight and sustain it. Right. So timelines help people kind of get realistic about what you're up to. You can really look at your life history to get a sense of, what might be some realistic intentions to set.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, the other thing that I think you kind of touched on is that, particularly for people who are older, right? They are looking back at what some doctor or somebody else told them when they were 30.
That's right.
That not only is not realistic, it's not good for them, And the other thing I think that a lot of people don't understand is that if they would exercise, your muscles weigh more.
That's right.
So you're actually healthier, even though you're 10 pounds
That's right.
heavier
That's right.
than you were. And there's all these little kind of things that people just don't, that you can tell them that they're not getting from their little lose weight fast book that they bought
Their
on
little app. Yeah.
yeah,
There's
at
a
the
lot of
market.
binary thinking in nutrition and health. Like, good,
Hmm.
what this is a good exercise or a bad exercise. And it's very quantitative, numbers focused, and
Yeah.
it can feel a little bit shallow. I love what you said about this person, and maybe not even just a person, but like as a whole in
Hmm.
society, this idea of chasing something of yesteryear, like a body or a workout plan of, the past, right? Like this idea of, it's almost like a euphoric recall of a body that one lived in,
Okay.
that felt like home. And,
Uh-huh.
um, yeah,
Or
it's
didn't feel
interesting.
like home,
Or didn't feel like home.
which is why they're not there anymore.
Right. So yeah, I have a couple theories. One is that if people live in a body that doesn't feel like home, it can be traumatic. And then
Hmm.
they're having a trauma response where their
Okay,
life is
that makes
set
sense.
up. Yeah, their
Uh-huh.
life is set
Yeah.
up to make sure to never recreate that experience. One of the
Yeah.
major symptoms of trauma or PTSD is
Uh-huh.
avoidance. So if you were to use that
Okay, that makes
framework,
sense.
someone had
Yeah.
some changes in their body that were
Hmm.
very aversive and difficult. And it left an imprint of let's never let that happen again, which is why
Yes.
some people could become, lifetime dieters, or,
Yeah.
people that tend to go to extremes or even prioritize that over everything else in life. There's also the opposite when people have a recall of a time when things were well. I remember once chatting with someone
Mm.
in my practice who was kind of convinced that, um, they needed to be gluten free. And
Mm.
I'm not against that. I believe that a lot of the reasons why people feel better on gluten-free diets isn't because of the gluten, but it's also because of the wheat, right? Like
Oh yeah,
the glyphosate and some of the other hazardous compounds
for
that track
sure.
with wheat in the United States. But anyways, the person was reminiscing about when they felt the best, and they were on this gluten-free diet. And then we were trying to figure out like if it was the best thing for them. And it was a challenge because the person had some like binge eating behavior. So by trying so hard not to do it, they ended up like doing it with
Yeah.
the guilt, right? And so we were trying to figure out if this was in
Uh-huh.
fact a good rule for them to have in their
Okay.
life. And
Uh-huh.
what I discovered with this person was that um, they were on a gluten-free diet for a year and a half, many years ago, while they were in a relationship with someone that they really loved. It was a really good
Oh
relation.
no. Yeah.
And so they remember feeling really well in that period of their
Yeah.
life, and
Yeah.
they connected it to the gluten-free.
Right.
And what we were able to see is that you're kind of like reminiscing on a positive period in your life of wellness, but there was really a lot of connection and love that
Uh-huh.
created that, and they
Yeah.
may have subconsciously attributed it to the gluten-free
Right.
rather than the thing. And so,
Uh-huh.
yeah, the mind is fascinating when you get to talk to people about these things day in and day out. You just learn all the intricacies of the human mind and, yeah, the health psychology, we call it.
Yeah, well, if yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think people they come up with all kinds of reasons slash excuses for why this happened, why this didn't happen, why, right? And I'm not saying this negatively, it's just a fact of life.
That's right.
But people don't seem to understand that. And it's like once they understand that, it's like, oh, okay, okay. It doesn't mean they won't do it again, but they can kind of say, oh, okay, that makes sense why I did da 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 da,
That's right.
right? Why I
Yeah.
left my husband at that point and then later on got back with him or whatever. I mean, just, you know,
the mind has to build a narrative to make
Yeah,
sense out of the lived experience, right?
right.
If there's unexplained phenomenon, it's difficult for the mind. And so it almost needs to ascribe meaning, right? Like you
Hmm.
said, some
Yeah,
reason, explanation, justification. It needs to do that. And I say it meaning the mind
right.
needs to do that in order to resolve any cognitive dissonance. So if there's anything that's conflicting or feels difficult
Yeah.
to resolve, it's going to leave the mind unsettled. So it naturally will develop some sort of a narrative to be able to move on, to make peace
Mm-hmm.
with it.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes there's accuracy in narratives, but oftentimes, as I think you pointed to, people have just created a story about something in order to make sense of it. And it
Uh-huh.
isn't grounded in facts as much as it is in the pursuit of making sense or reducing conflict, right? So,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
another assignment I like to give people, and perhaps some of your listeners might be interested in this, is
Uh-huh.
making a list of all your old ideas that you have
Mm,
about food and that you have about body, right? It can
mm,
really be a meaningful assignment
mm-hmm.
to starting to think about what might be some of my underlying beliefs that have
Yeah.
stuck with me for decades. Like it's not uncommon that um, a mom or an uncle made a comment, about a
Oh,
food
yeah.
or about, what you should do or how you should look or how you fit in a certain
Yep. Yep.
outfit,
Yep. Yep.
and it stuck. Right? It
Oh,
wouldn't be
yeah.
uncommon
Yeah.
for me to have a client who was 66 that was still subscribed to something that a doctor said when they were 14. It just became
Uh-huh.
sticky because it happened during development. And when things happen during development, meaning when the brain is growing, it can sort of get cemented into those pathways and really become embedded into the psyche. And if someone
Yeah.
has a lot of old ideas around food and body, it's going
Yeah.
to prevent them from having new experiences, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Oh, no, exactly. Exactly. And the other thing I'll throw out there, having been through this myself a number of times, is that, you have to be careful of what your family says to you,
Yes.
right? Either when you've lost weight or when you've put it back on again, or before you lost the weight or whatever.
Right.
I mean, I have I have a brother who had said to me, like, 40 years after I lost the weight, gee, you really kept the weight off well. It's like, excuse me?
Right.
You know, it's like
I know.
some
Body
people are
talk.
just, yeah, there's some people are just
Yeah, I think it was normative behavior in the 90s and early 2000s, and that it was a socially acceptable thing to make comments about people's appearance. And I
Yeah.
think in the last 10 years, more and more people are sort of realizing that there's just a lot of room for bruising and sensitivity there. And I think more and more people are kind of waking up to this idea that even in some cases, it's just as inappropriate to make a comment about weight that
Yeah.
someone has lost as it is to make a comment about weight that someone has gained, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh no,
Yeah,
exactly. I mean, it's great if someone just says, gee, you're looking really good,
yeah.
right?
I feel your
Stop
glow.
there,
Yeah,
right? Right.
yeah,
You don't have to say because you lost weight or because you this, just you're looking really great,
yeah.
you know?
I tell people the energy that you're giving off is landing differently. I feel your
Yes.
wellness. I feel your
Hmm.
vibrancy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like that. I like that. That's good. Yeah. Yeah. It's so tell me a little bit, tell us a little bit about, some of the things that maybe that's not the right way to say it. Some of the ways that you work with people
Sure.
and
Yeah.
the ones, you know, not to make stereotypes or anything of that kind of way, but you know, that these, there are people who are doing da 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 da, and
Yeah.
if they look at it this way, it might give them a little different view of.
Yeah. I approach my work, I am a dietitian by
Mhm.
training.
Right.
I'm also a mental health scientist. And so I do counseling,
Hmm.
and I also practice, functional medicine. So
Uh-huh.
bring together a couple different
Yeah.
things to try to really be helpful. And I do operate a lot like a therapist,
Mhm.
in the sense that there's a natural discovery
Yeah.
and progression process. And I do still get people that reach out to me looking for some sort of quick fix, like,
Yeah.
can you give me my, can you give me my diet? Right, basically.
Yeah, right.
And it's like I'm not like against, helping people move quickly. I want to see people move quickly, but I tend to operate under the assumption that this is like more depth work,
Hmm.
right? That necessitates the same way like no one would go to see a therapist for one session. Like you probably wouldn't come to try to
You would hope not. Yeah.
transform 4 decades of chronic dieting in one session.
Right.
So I tend to like, work with people that I know that they're gonna like do some weekly sessions for at least a
Mm.
month. You know what I mean?
Yeah, to
And
start, just to
yeah,
start.
just to start, right?
Yeah.
It takes a lot of the pressure off of me to need to like perform and
Uh-huh.
provide, what some people think they need. So
Right.
I've learned there's a difference between what people want and what people need. And as a practitioner, it's like I want to give people
Uh,
what they want, but I have to give them what they need. So I'm finding the sweet spot, right?
yeah.
So there's times when someone's like, "Can you just give me a meal plan?" And I'm like, "No, I want you to like, let's start logging your meals in the app, checking in with your hunger fullness. Let's start journaling, taking a look at what went well, what you could do better. And then we'll slowly start to make gradual changes in your approach to eating. Maybe we'll start with meal timing. Maybe we'll start thinking about food groups. Maybe we'll start thinking about the rate at which you consume food, grocery shopping, cooking,
Hmm.
joy,
Hmm.
celebration, like
Yeah.
bringing together a framework that can be transformative rather than just another diet. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
I've been doing it for a while. I used to use other people's apps to
Um,
have people track their food, and these are recovery apps, by the way, so not
hmm.
calorie apps. There's fitness apps, and there's more apps that are
Okay.
designed to promote more of a qualitative approach to
Yeah.
eating. So, yeah, I used other people's apps for quite a while, and I finally built my own,
All
which
right.
has been my big project in the last few years. I built an app called Wise Mind Nutrition. It's three different
Ah.
words. Wise mind coming from dialectical behavioral therapy, which is
Uh-huh.
about finding this sort of middle ground
Hmm.
between, logic and emotions,
Uh-huh.
using your wise mind. So the app is a middle ground between, you know, um, recovery and also, different mental health needs. There's like a balance between being like intentional and deliberate, and then also being a little bit more relaxed and fluid. There's a good blend of energies in there so that people could find what resonates with them.
Yeah.
So there's a food log and there's a video program, and it's
Wow.
personalized based on mental health. So
Ah,
there's
okay.
a
Uh-huh.
process by which someone could figure out if they have depressive symptoms or
Hmm.
anxiety, etc. And if they have, for example, trauma symptoms, you're going to get maybe a couple different recommendations. Maybe you'll get pinged to pay more attention here. But there's
Ah,
there's a
interesting.
program in there that's helpful to people who are looking for a little bit more of a deeper experience with
Hmm.
nutrition and lifestyle.
Okay, a
So
little more support.
little more support, but it's different than a lot of the other apps because, apps are designed to, make life easy and solve problems. And when you're doing treatment and recovery work, it's not always like easy. It's like I'm
Yeah.
kind of like, no, I want you to like do this assignment. Like I want you, you know what I mean? So
Uh-huh.
for
Yeah.
people that are really ready and looking for that level of engagement, the app is perfect. For people that are not really like prepared to do all that, you can use it in a much lighter and gentler way. Maybe
Okay.
just doing a journal entry at the end of the day
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and just like setting some intentions. You could use the app and say,
Right.
I want to eat all the colors of the rainbow. I want to drink 2 liters of water. And
Uh-huh.
it gives you a little reminder at the end of the day. And you could check in,
Uh-huh.
like, did I do it? What can I do differently tomorrow? And you can use it just for that. You could use it as a food log. You could use it to connect with other people and if you have a coach or a provider,
Mm-hmm.
that person can follow you,
Ah,
can follow
great.
your friends. I'm in the
Uh-huh.
process of creating a little bit more of a community so people can find other people to connect
Okay.
with on the app. Like
Uh-huh.
there's a
Yeah,
lot
no,
of
that makes
privacy
sense.
issues to
Yeah.
where like you can't see other
Oh,
people. You
yeah.
have to know their username. So creating a little bit of a place for people to opt in and share that
Mm-hmm.
is my next step. But yeah, the app has basically transformed my practice into being this sort of difficult, expensive thing to something that all people can access. All my
That's
handouts
great.
and recipes, they're all in the app.
All
So
right. Uh-huh.
yeah, it's a cool resource. Wise Mind Nutrition. It's Apple, Google, and yeah, I love seeing people get through the program. We've had people that have had decade legacies with disordered eating
Wow.
find some peace here and feel grounded and feel more neutral with food. And yeah, the
Yeah.
whole point of it is nutrition for mental health. And it's cool to be sort of a pioneer in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Excuse me. And I can see where it would be so helpful for people to have something that they can go to and not try and get on the phone with you or text you or whatever people do these days, you know. Um,
I built it so that people that are in the app can send me messages and stuff.
yeah.
So
Oh,
that,
exactly. Yeah.
yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's great.
Yeah, I'm
Very
proud of it.
nice.
It's
Yeah.
relatively new and we're adding more and more features as we go.
Hmm.
So
Well,
feedback from users is always
that's
welcomed.
and that's how you grow things,
That's right.
especially on the internet or
Mhm.
online, I guess. It's not
Mhm.
even just the internet anymore. Um, excuse me, showing my age there. Okay, well, I think we that kind of brings us kind of full circle here.
Yep.
I don't know if there's anything else you want to just wrap up with, any
Sure.
last
Yeah.
advice or and
The
where
the
people
app
can.
is Wise Mind Nutrition, which you
Mhm.
can find at wisemindnutrition.com or in the App Store. But I
Okay,
also have
so
my
spell wise.
WISE
Okay.
MIND. I know it's
Just making
confusing because my
sure.
last name is Wiss.
Yeah.
So people, I created that mess, but it is truly the best name for the app.
Oh yeah, no, no,
Wise
no.
Mind
Yes,
Nutrition.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah, I had to make it so that if someone did search for my last name, WISS Mind, that it'll come up. So
Yeah.
I'm findable on the internet. My clinical practice is called Nutrition in Recovery, and that's
Okay.
nutritioninrecovery.com. And I guess if I
Uh-huh.
could, leave our listeners with anything, I would say that, it's never too late to adopt a new framework for
Mhm.
eating. The dominant frameworks have been the calorie system and the macronutrient system. And then there's other frameworks that are focused on, micronutrients and things like that.
Mm.
But we have some emerging frameworks in
Mm.
the dimensions of nutritional psychology and nutritional psychiatry that
Oh.
are more focused on gut health and
Huh.
inflammation and
Uh-huh.
thinking about food more qualitatively, like the degree of processing, right? Ultra
Okay.
processed foods versus minimally processed foods. And
Right.
yeah, there's a paradigm shift happening right now that's making nutrition feel like a little bit more evolved rather than
Mhm.
this sort of free for all space where people just focus on fitness and appearance.
Mhm.
So yeah, I want to encourage anyone, if you've done the vanity thing for so long, it's tricky because the mind is kind of focused in that direction. But
Mhm.
what we're doing at Wise Mind Nutrition is the sanity thing. So we put sanity before vanity. And if you lead with the
Oh,
mind, If you lead with the mind
Yeah.
and you lead with the recovery, the body stuff tends to follow. If you lead with the vanity and you lead with the calories and you lead with the body, the other stuff doesn't always follow. And oftentimes it recreates the issue. So lead with recovery, lead with the healing, do the internal work. We say it's an inside job, and watch the rest of your health follow.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I totally agree. So thanks you very much. No, thank you for coming on. It's been enlightening is not exactly the right word, but seeing all of these things that are being developed, not just by you, but to support people.
Paradigm shifts.
Yeah, for sure, which is great. So I am going to say what I usually say, and sometimes it's applicable, and sometimes it isn't, but I always have to say it, which is that neither of us are doctors, and this is not to be seen as medical advice.
Beautiful.
So if you do want some advice that's for you, you know where to go, especially if you're having trouble with your eating habits, amongst other things. And with that, I will say what I always say, which is that I will see everybody else next week.
This has been Healthy Tips After 50 with Susan Rosen. To stay on the cutting edge of the most effective health strategies, subscribe to this podcast and let us know what you thought of the show with a comment or like on iTunes. Visit healthytipsafter50.com for this episode's show notes, more resources, and free offers.